That morning, I was out when I got a call from Travis Coleman, the plumber I'd hired to fix a leaking pipe behind the wall in my wife Claire's old office. But Travis didn't sound like someone calling to talk about tools or give me a price estimate. His voice was tight and low, like he was afraid someone might be listening. "Dan, you need to come home right now." My wife had died a year ago from a stroke, and the room that used to be hers was one I almost never opened. Travis said that when he removed the section of wall damaged by the leak, he found something that shouldn't exist in that house, a hidden cavity, with signs that someone had been crawling in and out of it, and he didn't want me walking into whatever this was alone. I swallowed hard, because if a plumber had to warn me not to come home by myself, then whatever was waiting in that house definitely wasn't just a normal leak. Scroll past. I'm telling it because some secrets aren't hiding out on the street, they're hiding right behind the walls of your own home. A few details may be slightly changed to protect real people, but what you're about to hear is the raw truth. Someone had been planning a script for a long time, and I was blind to it for an entire year. If you're still watching at this point, comment where you're from, then keep listening. Because after that call from Travis, I understood one thing clearly. The leak was just an excuse. The thing that was really leaking inside my house was a crime. My name is Daniel, Dan Whitaker. A year ago, my wife Claire died of a stroke. At least that's what the doctors said, and what my family was forced to accept. Since the day Claire was gone, the house has felt like all the sound was drained out of it. I still live there, still go to work, still pay the bills, but in truth, I'm just existing. Claire had her own office at the end of the hallway. I almost never open that door, not because of superstition, but because I can't stand the feeling of seeing all of her things still exactly where she left them while she's no longer here. The faint scent of lavender still lingers sometimes, like a cruel little joke. Last week, I noticed a damp stain spreading along the wall near that room. I called a plumber because I thought it was simple. But after Travis's call, I understood something. The leak was just the surface. Underneath it, there might be something Claire had tried to hide, or something someone else had hidden in her place. Travis told me he had removed the wall panel because the leaking pipe ran deep inside. At first, it was just the smell of mildew and soaked insulation. But when he shined his flashlight in, the beam slipped through an empty space that shouldn't have been there. "Dan, this cavity wasn't caused by natural damage," he said. "The cuts are clean. There are fresh screw marks like someone deliberately created a hidden compartment and then sealed it back up." He also told me the dust inside had been disturbed, and there were faint shoe prints on the floor, the kind left by a person crawling in and out, not by mice or a broken pipe. That was why he warned me the way he did. Don't come back alone. If someone tried to hide this, the person who hid it might still be around. After hearing that, my throat went dry, because the word leak had suddenly turned into secret compartment, and my house, all of a sudden, no longer felt like a safe place. I drove home immediately. Before stepping inside, I called Logan Pierce, an investigator I knew, to come stand with me. I wasn't stupid anymore. If Travis had told me not to come back alone, there had to be a reason. Travis was waiting in Claire's office. The room looked exactly the way it had the day she died. The wooden desk neatly arranged, a few notebooks stacked on top, the faint scent of lavender drifting through the air like an old wound being reopened. But the wall behind the bookshelf had been partially removed, exposing the wooden panels and the frame inside. Travis pointed. Right there, behind the soaked insulation, was a rectangular cavity, deeper than it should have been. Looking closer, you could see the wooden edges had been cut cleanly, with fresh screws like someone had opened it before and then carefully sealed it back up again. I crouched down and shined my flashlight into the opening. In the darkness inside the wall cavity, something reflected the beam with a cold glint. Not a pipe, a corner of metal, like a safe built directly into the wall. Travis pulled a work light closer. The stronger light flooded the cavity, and I could see it clearly now. It wasn't some random piece of metal. It was a wall safe, bolted tightly into the wooden frame, like it had been deliberately installed a long time ago. Logan crouched beside it, studying the edge of the compartment. He tapped lightly on the frame and said quietly, "This isn't accidental. It's a hidden compartment." I reached out and touched the front of the safe. It was ice cold. On the front was a small 4-digit keypad and a turning knob. There wasn't a thick layer of dust like something that had been abandoned for a year. Instead, there were a few fresh scratches, like someone had opened it, closed it, and touched it not that long ago. Travis lowered his voice. "Dan, do you understand now why I told you not to come back alone?" I swallowed and stared at the keypad. If this safe belonged to Claire, it meant my wife had been hiding a secret I never knew about. And if it wasn't hers, then someone had been using my house as a place to store something they never wanted anyone to find. I stood in front of the keypad, my hand resting on the cold steel surface. 4 numbers. Just 4 numbers. But it felt like a door separating me from a truth I might not be ready for. I thought about Claire. If she had really left this for me, she would have chosen a code that only the two of us would know. Not a birthday, not the house number, something that belonged only to us. I took a slow breath and glanced at Travis, then at Logan. Both of them were silent, the kind of silence people keep when they know this is the moment the story could change direction. I typed in the code, "Our wedding anniversary." A soft beep sounded. The light changed color. Then click, the lock released. The safe door opened slowly, almost like it was hesitating. I reached out and pulled it wider, my heart pounding. Inside, I immediately saw a small USB drive, an old leather notebook, and several thick manila folders labeled with the names of people I recognized. Travis let out a quiet breath. "Dan, this isn't about a leak anymore." I took each item out and placed them on Claire's desk like pieces of evidence. The tiny USB drive, the worn leather notebook, and a stack of heavy manila folders, each labeled in Claire's familiar handwriting. But the thing that made me freeze was the names written on those folders. They weren't strangers. They were names I saw every week, people I trusted like family. Ethan Whitaker, my son. Vanessa Whitaker, my daughter-in-law. Dr. Gregory Hale, our family doctor. Chuck Barron, my business partner and close friend. I looked up at Logan. He didn't give me the usual cheap reassurance like, maybe it's just normal paperwork. He just looked back at me, his expression serious. "Dan, if Claire put their names on private files and locked them in a safe, then either she was investigating them or she was afraid of them." Travis, standing beside us, quietly pointed to the floor near the section of wall that had been removed. The dust there had been smeared into faint streaks, like someone had knelt down in that exact spot before. And that was when it hit me. I wasn't the first person to open this safe. The first page had only a few lines, but the moment I read them, my whole body went numb. "Dan, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here, and I don't believe it was a stroke. If I die, treat it as a murder disguised as something else. Don't trust the people whose names are on those folders. They know more than you think." I turned the page. The entries that followed were dated, written almost like investigation notes. A strange comment someone made, a doctor's appointment that felt off, the time Ethan asked about money, the moment Vanessa started probing about the will. Everything recorded in a cold, methodical way, like someone preparing for the worst. Logan stood behind me and spoke quietly. "Dan, Claire didn't write this to vent. She wrote it as a warning. And right then, it hit me. Claire's death might have been the beginning, not the end." I opened the first folder. Ethan Whitaker. Inside were bank statements, printed emails, and Claire's handwritten notes. She had highlighted payments that didn't match the company records, times Ethan had pushed for urgent signatures, and one line that made my stomach drop. Ethan is siphoning money from the company, and someone is backing him. My hands felt heavier as I reached for the next folder. Vanessa Whitaker. Inside were background searches, old names, former addresses, and timelines that lined up in a strange way with the accidents of several men in her past. Claire had written in the margin, Vanessa changed identities. The pattern repeats, marriage, control, profit. Then I opened the folder labeled Dr. Gregory Hale. Claire had written down her own symptoms, nausea, hair loss, confusion, and beside them, a question. Why does the doctor keep changing my medication and vitamins? Why does everything get worse right after every appointment? With Hale. The last folder was Chuck Barron. Claire's note was short, but it made my chest tighten. Chuck introduced Hale. Chuck knows far too much about the will. Chuck stands in the middle of everything. I slowly closed the folders. My back felt ice cold. Because Claire hadn't been suspicious of just one person. She had been suspicious of an entire group. While I was still flipping through the files, Logan crouched near the exposed wall, running his flashlight along the baseboard and the wooden floor. Dan, look at this. The dust along the base of the wall wasn't settled evenly. It had been smeared into faint streaks, like someone had knelt there, reached into the cavity, then hurriedly wiped the area. Along the wooden edge were thin pry marks, the kind a screwdriver would leave, and a few screws that looked newer than the rest of the wall frame. Travis nodded firmly. This compartment didn't open itself. Someone knew it was here, and they've opened it. More than once. I stood there in silence, staring at the safe we had just unlocked. If Claire had hidden it to protect me, then someone else had been trying to control that secret after she died. And right then, a terrifying thought settled in. I wasn't just investigating a death anymore. I was investigating someone who might still be very close. I flipped back to the leather notebook and started reading more carefully. The deeper I read, the colder my hands felt. Claire hadn't written like someone panicking. She had written like someone preparing for her own death. One passage in the middle of the notebook hit me like a punch. If you've read this far, Dan, then I never had the chance to tell you in person. And you need to understand something. I did not die from a stroke. Someone made it look like a stroke. Then Claire listed the timeline, every sign, every moment that had started to bother her. Ethan asking about company paperwork and pushing for urgent signatures on strange days. Vanessa probing about the will, the assets, the insurance, like she was quietly calculating money. Dr. Hale constantly changing vitamins and medications right around the time Claire began losing hair, feeling nauseous and struggling with confusion. Chuck Barron, coincidentally, showing up at exactly the right moments, always present whenever paperwork needed to be handled. On the final page, Claire had written just one line, underlined hard enough to press into the paper. Us B drive. Listen, I looked up. Logan met my eyes and spoke quietly. Then plug the USB in, Dan. I plugged the USB into the laptop on Claire's desk. A single audio file appeared, named simply like Claire didn't want to leave any extra trace. Listen. End quote. I pressed play. Claire's voice filled the room. It sounded weak, but clear, every word deliberate, like she had practiced saying it through pain. Dan, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you in person. And you need to understand something. I didn't have a stroke. My symptoms don't match. It feels more like poisoning. She paused for a breath, then continued, her voice firmer. Don't trust Ethan. Don't trust Vanessa. And absolutely don't trust Dr. Hale or Chuck Barron. They're on the same side. They want me gone. And after that, they'll make you look mentally unfit so they can take everything. Then Claire delivered the final line, the one that made the blood in my veins feel like it stopped. I've already sent copies of the evidence to a lawyer. There's a sealed file. If I die, it will be opened at a predetermined time. I stopped the audio. My hands were shaking. Logan looked at me, his voice cold and steady. Dan, they didn't just kill Claire. They're trying to kill the truth, too. I was still trying to process everything Claire had said on that USB when I heard the sound of a car pulling up outside the house. My heart lurched like someone had suddenly grabbed it and squeezed. Ethan and Vanessa walked in wearing their usual, concerned family faces, fruit in hand, warm voices, performing the part of the loving son and daughter-in-law like they'd rehearsed it. But now I could see exactly what Claire had warned me about. They weren't there because of me. They were there to check what I knew. Ethan flicked a quick glance toward the hallway leading to Claire's office, then asked in that casually innocent tone people use when they're fishing for information. "Did the plumber finish up, Dad? Everything okay? He didn't have to tear into any walls or anything, did he?" Vanessa stood beside him, smiling softly, but her eyes didn't smile. "Don't stress yourself out, Dad. Your health's been a little up and down lately. You should really get some rest." That sounded like concern on the surface, but I could smell what it really was. A setup. When Ethan passed by the office, Vanessa subtly shifted for a second, blocking my view like she was trying to read whether I looked shaken. And the moment they turned their backs, I understood something. They weren't afraid that I might discover the secret. They were afraid of how much I had already discovered. They sat down at the kitchen table, like this was just an ordinary family visit. But Vanessa didn't wait long. She started casting her line in that syrupy, sweet voice that instantly made my skin crawl. "Dad, have you ever thought about updating your will? I mean, life is unpredictable. Anything can happen." I looked at her. Vanessa was still smiling, still speaking in that soft, gentle tone, but her eyes were cold, sharp, measuring every reaction on my face. Ethan picked it up from there, acting practical. "You're getting older, Dad. If the paperwork is clear, it makes things easier for all of us. And besides, you live alone. If something happens, that could get complicated fast." Vanessa tilted her head and added something that sounded like concern, but landed like a warning. "Exactly, Dad. Accidents. They happen so quickly, especially things like slipping, falling down the stairs. You never really see it coming." In that moment, I understood exactly what it was. This wasn't financial advice. It was a threat coated in sugar. I gave them a small nod and played along, keeping my face calm. But inside, only one thought kept repeating. Claire was right. They were testing me, trying to see whether I'd already caught the scent of danger. I pretended to get up for a glass of water, letting Ethan and Vanessa think I'd stepped away. Ethan's voice dropped, tight and urgent. He had the wall opened up. "What if the plumber found something?" Vanessa answered in a cold, flat voice completely stripped of that sweet tone she'd been using before. "Stay calm. What matters is how much he's already seen. If he found it, we need to move fast." End quarter, one-sided BC. Ethan muttered a curse under his breath. Vanessa kept going. "Literally, don't let him have time to tell anyone. Remember the mental incapacity plan, right?" I stood there, frozen. At that point, it wasn't suspicion anymore. It was a scripted conspiracy. After they left, I went back into Claire's office with Logan. He swept his flashlight across the ceiling, then pointed toward the corner of the desk lamp, a tiny black dot, positioned with careful precision. Logan removed it, a miniature hidden camera. He looked at me and said it plainly. "Dan, they're watching you inside your own house." Early the next morning, I stopped sitting at home shaking. I packed everything into one bag. The USB, Claire's journal, the folders, and the hidden camera Logan had just removed. Then Logan and I went to meet Logan Pierce, a former cop who now worked as a private investigator. He didn't react with that dramatic movie-style shock. He just asked the kind of questions a man asks when he knows exactly what a real case smells like. Who benefits if Claire dies? Who had access to her medication and vitamins? Who's trying to have you declared mentally unfit? I played Claire's audio file. Logan Pierce listened to part of it, and his face hardened. Then he looked at me and said, "Dan, this isn't a family dispute anymore. This is a small, organized crime setup. Money, paperwork, a doctor, and relatives." He set the tiny camera on the table and twisted one of its screws loose, like snapping off a mask. "They planted this to watch your reactions. That means they're already preparing the next step." Then he said something that made me realize exactly where I was standing. "You're not just investigating Claire's death anymore. You're trying to stay alive." That afternoon, Logan Pierce told me there was one thing I needed to do immediately: find Claire's private attorney. If Claire had said there was a sealed file, then that was where the key to the truth would be. We met Marianne Keller in a small, discreet office. The moment I placed the USB and Claire's journal on her desk, the color drained from her face. She didn't give me the polite, "Are you sure?" routine. She went straight to the point. "Dan, Claire prepared for this before she died." Marianne opened a steel cabinet drawer and pulled out a thick envelope sealed shut. She explained that Claire had left behind a sealed file, one that was only supposed to be opened at a specific time if something bad happened. Then she dropped the twist that made my blood run cold. "Last week, someone filed a petition asking the court to declare you mentally incompetent so they could take legal control over you. It includes signatures and medical certification, but I believe they're forged." She looked me straight in the eye. "They don't just want the money. They want to turn you into someone who no longer has the right to tell the truth." Marianne slid a stack of papers across the desk toward me. It was a petition filed with the court, asking for me to be declared legally incompetent to manage my own assets or make my own medical decisions. Ethan's name wasn't written outright in the opening line, but the signatures and connections were obvious enough the path had already been cleared for my own son to take control as guardian. She tapped the medical certification section. "There's a doctor's signature here, and this is where it gets dirty. They're building a medical file against you, so from now on, anything you say can be dismissed as confusion." I turned the pages one by one. There were notes claiming I had become forgetful, irrationally angry, easily influenced, like a script had already been written for who I was supposed to become. Marianne spoke slowly, her voice steady. "Dan, once the court accepts this, they can freeze your accounts, control your medical treatment, and turn you into a living man with no right to resist." I set the papers down. My hands felt ice cold. That was when I finally understood. The trap wasn't just about money. It was about taking away my right to exist on my own terms. The very next morning, things started unfolding exactly like the incompetent scenario Marianne had warned about. My bank called to confirm a large transaction, $50,000, that had just been transferred out of my account. They said the order carried a signature that matched my file, but I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even stepped inside the bank. Logan Pierce heard the bank story and gave just one short response. "They're building a paper trail to show you're confused and unable to manage your finances." I barely had time to process that before another thing arrived. A package was delivered to my house from Dr. Gregory Hale's clinic. Inside was a bottle of medication, along with a polite note, "Helps you sleep better and reduces anxiety." I stared at the pills in my hand and felt a chill run through me. Because if they could control the paperwork, the next step was controlling my body. And once I swallowed something like this, anything I said the next day could be dismissed with a single sentence. "He's really losing it." From that moment on, I made a decision. I wouldn't take anything they gave me. Logan Pierce didn't waste time sitting around guessing. He worked the way old cops do. Quiet, methodical. He took a sample of the pills and sent them off to be tested. He told me to gather everything Claire had taken before she died. Vitamin bottles, supplements, even the half-empty medication boxes still sitting in the cabinet. We sealed them up like evidence and sent them to an independent lab, one that had nothing to do with Dr. Gregory Hale. A few days later, Logan called me. His voice was flat, colder than I'd ever heard it. Dan, the results are back. He laid the report in front of me. Right there on the page was the name of a substance I never expected to see connected to my life. Thallium, a heavy metal poison. I stared at that word and felt the air drain out of my chest. Because now there was no more maybe, no more gut feelings, no more imagining things. Claire hadn't died from a stroke. Claire had been poisoned. And more importantly, if thallium had been put into Claire's body, it could just as easily be prepared for mine. I thought that after the lab confirmed the poison, they might back off. They didn't. Someone who has already poisoned one person doesn't stop at threats. That day, I was driving out to meet Marianne. As I started down a slope, I pressed the brake pedal and it sank far deeper than it should have. The car barely slowed. My heart slammed against my ribs. I swerved toward the shoulder, yanked the handbrake, and fought to keep the car from rolling straight into the intersection. I called Logan Pierce immediately. He arrived not long after. I barely had to explain anything. He crouched under the car with a flashlight, checked the underside, then looked up at me with a hard expression. The brake line's been tampered with. This isn't normal wear. He wiped his hands on a rag and added quietly, Dan, someone didn't just want to scare you. Someone wanted you gone. Before I could even calm down, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Just 2 words. Stop digging. I stared at the screen and understood immediately. They had just sent me a very clear message. Either I stayed quiet, or I would be the next one. After the brake sabotage, Logan didn't sugarcoat it. They'll try something else. And the fastest way is to put something into your body. Not long after that, Ethan called and invited me to dinner. His voice sounded unusually sweet. Come eat with us tonight, Dad. It'll be nice. Nice. The kind of nice that feels like someone setting a stage. Logan clipped a small recording device onto me before I left. The plan was simple. Let Ethan and Vanessa talk. People like them always believe they're smarter than everyone else. I arrived, sat at the table, and watched them perform the role of the perfect family. Smiles, warm voices, plates set neatly on the table. But now I could see it clearly. This wasn't dinner. It was a test. Vanessa poured wine into my glass. Her hand trembled just slightly, but the smile on her face never slipped. Ethan kept leaning in with those careful, probing questions. Dad, have you been sleeping okay lately? Did you take the medication Dr. Hale gave you? I barely touched anything. Just small sips, polite gestures watching every glass, every plate that came near me. But not long after I left their house, it started. My stomach twisted. My head grew light. My throat felt dry and raw. The feeling hit me with a sick sense of familiarity, exactly like the symptoms Claire had described in her journal. Logan didn't hesitate. He drove me straight to an independent doctor. The blood test results came back with something that made my stomach drop. Thallium. Again. Which meant one thing. Brutally clear. They hadn't just poisoned Claire. The hearing moved fast, cold and sharp as a blade. The other side came in with what looked like a perfect package. Guardianship papers, edited video clips of me looking exhausted, and Dr. Gregory Hale taking the stand to claim I was declining mentally and prone to paranoia. Ethan sat there, wearing the face of a grieving, dutiful son. Vanessa held his hand, playing her role exactly right. The caring daughter-in-law, worried about her father-in-law. But this time, I didn't walk into that courtroom led by emotion. I walked in with evidence. My lawyer called the independent doctor first. He testified that I was fully lucid and showed no sign of legal incapacity. Then Logan submitted the thallium lab results, the report on the tampered brake line, and the hidden camera found inside my house. Finally, I played Claire's audio. If you're hearing this, It means I was killed. After that, nobody in the courtroom could keep acting. The judge looked straight at Ethan's side and issued the ruling. The guardianship petition was denied, and an investigation was ordered into elder abuse and financial exploitation. I had barely stepped out of the courthouse when I saw Chuck Barron waiting in the parking lot, one hand in his pocket, looking as calm as if this were just a coffee meeting. And that calm was the most disturbing part because innocent people don't wait like that. Chuck stepped closer and lowered his voice. Dan, you made this a lot bigger than it needed to be today. But there's still a quiet way out for everyone. I looked him straight in the eye. I knew exactly what his version of a quiet way out meant. Keep my mouth shut, sign the papers, and disappear inside a file. Chuck gave a slight smirk. You think Ethan pulled all this off by himself? The paperwork? The doctor? The money? Somebody had to arrange it. I don't want you having another accident. So listen carefully. Stop digging. Hand over everything Claire left behind, and I'll make sure you get to live in peace. Logan stood a few feet behind me, already recording. Chuck had no idea, and that made him keep talking, every word tightening the noose around his own neck. If you keep pushing, we'll make you look like some paranoid old man. And next time, it won't just be a guardianship petition. I gave him a small nod, my voice flat as stone. All right. Then say it clearly. What exactly do you want in exchange for my life? I didn't lunge at Chuck Barron or argue with him. Arguing is for people who don't have evidence. I chose something better. I let him keep talking. I lowered my voice, pretending I was starting to bend. All right. So, what exactly do you want me to do? Chuck thought I was cracking, so he started spilling everything. He mentioned Claire's files, the safe. The evidence said that if I handed it all back, everything could still go smoothly. He even slipped and brought up Dr. Hale and their plan to make me look like a paranoid old man, which meant he was confirming, with his own mouth, that this was a coordinated setup, not some messy little family dispute. Logan stayed at a distance, capturing every word cleanly on audio. I also sent Marianne Keller a single text. Chuck just threatened me and mentioned the guardianship plan and the doctor. Get the supplemental filing ready now. Before we parted, I gave Chuck one last line, just enough to make him step deeper into his own trap. Tomorrow. Riverside Park. I'll bring what you want. Chuck smiled. Smart man. What he didn't know was this. I wasn't bringing what he wanted. I was bringing the handcuffs, waiting for him to say one more stupid thing. The next morning, I arrived at Riverside Park right on time. I didn't bring the real files. I didn't bring the original USB. I only brought a fake folder, harmless photocopies, and something far more valuable. Logan. Standing at a distance with video and audio rolling, and Marianne had already warned investigators ahead of time. Chuck showed up, calm, like a man who thought he was just coming to collect a debt. He sat down across from me and looked straight at the folder. You bring everything? I pretended my hands were shaking and slid the folder across the table. What about the safe? The code? Where are the originals? Worth the safe. Worth the safe. I kept him talking, nudging him closer to saying exactly what I needed on record. So, if I hand it all over, you'll stop the guardianship thing, stop Dr. Hale, stop the accidents, right? Chuck gave a thin smile and delivered the dumbest sentence of his life. Right. Because if you don't, you're not going to live peacefully. Right. End quote. At that exact moment, Logan stepped out from behind the path, phone raised and recording. Thanks, he said calmly. That's enough. Chuck turned too late. The trap had already snapped shut. In the distance, sirens cut through the morning air. It was no longer a negotiation. This was a catch on record. The officers didn't rush in like a movie scene. They walked straight toward Chuck Barron, like they already knew exactly what they were there to take. The threat, the coercion, and the words he had just spoken, "You won't live peacefully." Chuck switched tone instantly, forcing a laugh, trying to twist the moment. "Hey, we were just talking." But now, that conversation was locked inside Logan's audio and video recordings, stacked on top of everything else, already building against him. The fake guardianship petition, the thallium poisoning evidence, the hidden camera, the sabotaged brake line. Within minutes, Chuck Barron was in handcuffs right there in the park. When the officer read him his rights, I didn't feel triumph. I just stood there, watching, with a cold realization settling in. Claire had been right from the very beginning. Logan stepped closer and spoke quietly beside me. Now the dominoes fall. Once Chuck's in custody, they'll have to pull in Dr. Hale, and then Ethan, and Vanessa. Nobody walks away from this. And, for the first time in a year, I believed something again. The truth was finally starting to win. After Chuck Barron was handcuffed in the park, things moved exactly the way Logan predicted. The police no longer treated it as a family dispute. They opened the case as a full criminal investigation: conspiracy, poisoning, financial exploitation, and elder abuse. Chuck's statements and the data they pulled from him led investigators straight to Dr. Gregory Hale. Prescription records, the constant switching of vitamins, and the timing of Claire's appointments lined up perfectly with the period when her condition rapidly worsened. The lab report confirming thallium in Claire's supplements and the independent medical review turned Hale into a link that couldn't be explained away. Then the trail reached Ethan and Vanessa. Forged signatures, suspicious money transfers, the hidden camera inside my house, and the recorded conversation about moving fast. When they were called in for questioning, they tried to perform their usual act, but acting doesn't work in an investigation, because the evidence had already been sealed and stacked long before they opened their mouths. In the end, the court handed down sentences to each of them according to their roles. I can't say I felt completely relieved, but for the first time, I could say something to Claire in my heart. I heard you, and I pulled you out of the lie they buried you in. After everything was over, I went back to the old house. It felt like stepping into a different place. Claire's office was still there. The faint scent of lavender still drifted through the room, but this time, it didn't feel like a haunting. It felt like a reminder that she had been fighting alone for far too long. I cleaned up the room, set a new code on the safe, and handed every original document to Marianne Keller for safekeeping. I changed the locks on the house, upgraded the security, and cut off every access point Ethan and Vanessa had once used to manipulate things around me. But the biggest lesson from all of this didn't come from the courtroom. It came from the line Claire left behind. Don't trust words when the documents and the evidence are screaming the opposite. People like them don't start with knives. They start with family ties, friendly doctors, paperwork, and your own trust until you become a legal victim. From here on, I'm living my life, not because I've forgotten Claire, but because I kept the promise I made to her, to pull her out of the lie they buried her in.